The night was quiet, but the quiet was not peaceful. Ethan, a human traveler, walked slowly through the strange forest of the alien world. His small ship had crashed only a few hours ago, smoke rising behind him as he searched for shelter. The sky above glowed with two pale moons, and the stars looked sharper than on Earth. Every tree seemed alive, the leaves moving like they had thoughts of their own. The air was thick with glowing insects, and their lights blinked like warnings. Ethan carried only a small light and a tool from his ship. He knew little about this planet, only the name from his star map Allura. But now, standing here, he felt like he had stepped into someone else's secret place. His heart beat fast, and his ears caught strange sounds, clicks, whispers, and cries that did not belong to animals he knew. Then, in the distance, he heard something different. It was not a growl, not a hiss, but a soft, high sound like a song. It rose and fell like music, echoing through the trees. Ethan froze. Because the sound was beautiful, but also lonely, step by step he moved closer, careful not to break a branch under his boots. The forest grew darker as the trees leaned over him. His light shook in his hand, and his breath grew heavy. Finally, through the glowing mist, he saw her, a figure, tall and slim. Standing on the rocks near a pool of silver water, her skin shimmered under the moons, and her body was covered in feathers that glowed faintly in blue and gold. Her hair fell down her back like threads of light. Her eyes were large, almost too large, shining with an animal fire, but also something human. She was singing, and the sound made the air tremble. Ethan's mouth went dry. He had read of alien species, but never had he seen one like her. She looked young, but powerful, like a princess lost in the wild. For a moment, he thought she had not noticed him, but then her song stopped. Her head turned slowly, and her eyes locked on his. The silence that followed was heavier than the forest around them. Ethan raised his free hand, showing he meant no harm. His voice shook when he spoke. "Hello. I don't want trouble." The feathered girl tilted her head. Her feathers shifting as if alive, she took a step forward, and the light of her feathers grew brighter. He could see her more clearly. Now her hands were human-like, but tipped with sharp nails. Her wings, folded close to her body, rustled like paper when she moved. Her gaze was sharp, but not cruel. She looked at him the way someone looks at a mystery. For long minutes, neither of them spoke. The forest whispered around them. The water rippled at her feet. Then, slowly, she raised her hand too. Copying his movement, Ethan felt a strange calm, like she was answering him without words. But then, a sound broke the moment. From far in the trees came a deep, heavy drumbeat. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, slow and steady, like a ritual. The feathered girl flinched, her feathers flattening tight against her body. Fear flashed across her face, and she turned to glance at the dark forest. Ethan realized the sound meant danger, though he did not understand why. She looked back at him, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak. Her mouth formed soft words, but the language was strange. Still, her eyes spoke louder than her voice, warning. Danger. Urgency. Ethan took a small step closer, wanting to help, but she shook her head quickly, holding out her hand to stop him. Her feathers rippled again, glowing brighter then, with sudden speed. She moved into the shadows. One step, then two, then she was gone. Only her glowing feathers disappeared into the black forest. The drumbeats grew louder for a moment, then faded again, leaving silence. Ethan stood frozen, his chest rising and falling fast. He looked at the empty place where she had stood, on the rock. A single golden feather lay glowing softly. He bent down and picked it up, the warmth of it strange against his skin. The feather pulsed like it carried life inside. Ethan held it tightly, feeling both fear and wonder. He whispered to himself, "Who are you?" But the night gave no answer, only silence, and somewhere deep in the forest. The drums began again. Ethan could not sleep that night. The glowing feather rested beside him like a strange light, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw her again, the feathered girl standing by the silver pool, her eyes deep and bright. The memory of the drums haunted him too, slow and heavy, beating in the distance like a warning that he could not understand. He wondered if she was in danger, or if she was. The danger, still. He felt something strong pulling him toward her. Like a thread tying their fates together, the next day he set out to explore the forest. His ship's systems were broken, and the repairs would take days, maybe weeks, but his mind was no longer. On the ship, he wanted to see her again. Every sound of wings in the trees made his heart jump. Every shadow made him stop and listen. Hours passed, and still no sign of her. Just when he thought he had imagined it all, he heard a soft rustle in the branches above. He looked up, and there she was, hidden among the trees, her feathers shimmering faintly in the filtered light. Ethan raised his hand again, slowly, showing peace. She tilted her head, just as she had done the night before. Then, with graceful movement, she climbed down, her talons scraping against the bark until she stood before him. Her eyes studied him carefully, not with hate, but with suspicion. Mixed with curiosity, Ethan smiled gently. "I remember you," he said softly, though he knew she might not understand. The feathered girl looked at the feather he held in his hand, and something in her expression softened. She stepped closer, her wings brushing against leaves. She touched the feather in his palm, her claws gentle but firm. Ethan noticed she carried a small wound on her wing, a cut that dripped faint blue liquid. When she tried to move it, pain flickered in her eyes. Without thinking, Ethan reached into his small pack and pulled out a strip of cloth. He pointed to her wound, then to the cloth. At first, she pulled back, not trusting him, but then she paused, studying his face as if searching for truth. Finally, she extended her arm toward him, letting him wrap the cloth around the cut. Their hands touched briefly, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. She let out a soft sound, almost like a purr, and for the first time, Ethan saw her smile. It was small, uncertain, but real. He felt warmth rise inside him, a sense of connection that was stronger than language. They spent hours together, moving through the forest. She showed him safe paths, warning him with a sharp gesture when poisonous plants glowed red. She pointed at strange beasts lurking in the shadows, creatures with too many eyes and too many teeth. When one of them came too close, Ethan raised his tool like a weapon. But she hissed and drove the beast away with a single sharp cry that echoed through the trees. Her voice had power more than just sound. It was like the forest itself listened. To her, by nightfall, they sat near a fallen log. Ethan shared a piece of dried food from his pack. She sniffed it, then laughed softly when the taste surprised her. In return, she gave him fruit from the forest, glowing and sweet, unlike anything he had ever tasted. Though they could barely speak, their gestures and laughter carried meaning. The silence between them no longer felt heavy, felt safe. But as the stars rose and the two moons climbed high, the sound of distant drumming returned. Boom, boom, boom. It carried through the air like a warning. The feathered girl's smile faded instantly. She stiffened, her feathers flattening, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan looked at her, trying to ask with his expression what the drums meant. She touched her chest, then pointed deep into the forest, shaking her head. Her voice cracked as she whispered something in her tongue, the sound trembling. Ethan could not understand, but he felt the weight of her fear. Suddenly, she grabbed his wrist and pulled him into the shadows. They crouched low among the roots of a massive tree as the drum beats grew louder. Figures moved in the distance, tall and dark, carrying torches that burned blue. Ethan's heart pounded. The feathered girl held him close, pressing a feathered wing over his mouth. Signaling silence, the hunters passed slowly, their eyes glowing, their steps heavy. Ethan realized these were not animals. They were her people, searching. But why? He wondered, did she hide from them? After a long, tense silence, the hunters disappeared into the trees, the drums fading with them. The girl released him, her hands trembling. Her eyes shone with both relief and sadness. Ethan touched her hand gently, and she did not pull away. For the first time, she whispered a single word in his language. "Broken but clear danger," she said, pointing to herself. Then to him, Ethan understood. Their bond was real, but it carried a shadow. Being with her meant stepping into danger. But something inside him knew he could not turn away. The storm came without warning. The skies of Valora darkened in seconds. Lightning tore across the twin moons, and thunder rolled like the anger of gods. Ethan had been following the feathered Gersilrilla as he now thought of Hearth, the deep forest, when the first drops of silver rain began to fall. The rain was strange, glowing faintly, burning cold against his skin. Kalira hissed sharply, grabbing his hand, pulling him forward with urgency. Her feathers shone brighter with every flash of lightning. Guiding him through the storm, they reached a cave hidden beneath a ridge of stone. The entrance was narrow, but inside it opened into a large hollow filled with shadows and echoes of dripping water. Kalira shook her wings, droplets scattering like sparks, and looked back at him with eyes both wild and tired. Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Trying to catch his breath, the storm raged outside, a wall of light and sound, sealing them in together for a long time. Neither spoke. The silence was heavy but not empty, was full of tension, questions, and unspoken things. Ethan's gaze drifted to her injured wing, still wrapped with his cloth, now soaked through. He stepped closer, gently touching the bandage. "Still hurts?" he asked softly. She tilted her head, not understanding every word, but sensing his meaning. She nodded, her lips curving into the smallest smile. The storm grew worse, wind howling through the cave mouth. Ethan shivered, pulling his jacket tighter. Kalira noticed, her feathers rising, and with a soft cry, she moved closer. Her wings stretched, then folded around him like a cloak. Warm and surprisingly soft, Ethan froze, stunned by the closeness. Her scent was strange. Like wildflowers mixed with rain, her eyes met his. Close enough for him to see the faint glow in their depths. Something powerful passed between them. Not just attraction, but something deeper. A recognition of two lonely souls finding shelter in each other. Kalira spoke then, her voice low and musical. The words were foreign, but she placed her hand against his chest as she spoke. He felt the meaning more than understood it. She was telling him something forbidden. "Something heavy with risk," Ethan whispered. "I don't understand, but I'm listening." She leaned closer, her feathers brushing his cheek, and whispered again, this time struggling to form words in his language, not aloud. "Human and me," she said slowly. The words sharp, broken, but clear enough. Her eyes shone with fear and longing. Ethan felt his chest tighten, realizing the truth. Her people forbade this. Forbade even being with him. The storm outside roared louder, hiding their voices, and in that storm, rules broke. Kalira's hand lingered on his chest, her touch trembling. Ethan lifted his hand, gently touching her feathers. Neither spoke now, because words no longer mattered. In the heart of the cave, as the storm raged around them, human and alien crossed the line drawn by fear and law. It was not just desire, was a bond sealed by loneliness, trust, and something neither of them fully understood. When the storm began to fade, silence crept back into the cave. The rain slowed. Thunder softened into distant rumbles. Kalira sat close beside him, Her wings folded gently around his shoulders. Her head rested lightly against him. Her breathing steady. Ethan felt both peace and unease. Knowing what they had shared was beautiful, but dangerous. Her people's drums still echoed in his memory. A reminder of the hunters searching for her. And now, if they discovered this, what would they do? Killara stirred, lifting her head, her expression shadowed by fear. She touched his hand, then brought a finger to her lips. Secret, she whispered in his language, her voice trembling. Never tell. Never. Her feathers rippled nervously as she repeated the word. Never. Ethan nodded firmly, his voice steady. I won't tell anyone. Not ever. Relief flickered across her face, but it did not erase the sadness in her eyes. As the first light of dawn crept into the cave, Killara rose. Her feathers glowed faintly, shining in the morning light like jewels. She looked back at Ethan, her gaze long and searching, as if memorizing him. Then she spoke one last time, her voice soft but urgent. You must not tell. What happened tonight? Before he could answer, she moved toward the cave mouth, her body shifting gracefully, her wings stretching wide, with a final look. She stepped into the mist of the forest and was gone. Only the echo of her words and the warmth of her feathers remained with him. Ethan sat alone in the cave, staring at the empty space she had left behind. The storm was over, but inside his heart, a new storm had begun. He knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan woke to silence. The cave was empty, the air still heavy with the memory of the storm. For a moment, he thought she might still be there, curled against the wall, her feathers glowing softly. But when he looked around, there was nothing. Only faint marks in the dust where her feet had been, and a single golden feather lying near the entrance. He picked it up, his chest tightening. The warmth of it was fading now, but it still pulsed faintly against his palm. He whispered her name to himself, though he had never truly known it. Killara. Her warning echoed in his mind. Never tell. Never speak of what happened that night. The words clung to him heavier than the storm. Outside, the forest was calm. Too calm. Bird-like creatures fluttered in the distance. Glowing insects hummed low in the air. But something about the silence of the trees felt wrong. It was as if the forest itself knew she was gone. Ethan walked slowly back toward the wreck of his ship, every step heavier than the last. Every sound behind him making him turn in hope, but no one followed. No feathered girl stepped from the shadows. Days passed. Ethan worked on the ship as best he could, patching wires, sealing holes, struggling with systems that sparked and smoked. But his mind was never fully on the work. At night, when the moons rose, he found himself listening for her song, that strange, haunting melody she had sung by the pool. Sometimes he thought he heard it, faint and distant, but when he ran into the forest, it was only silence. He began to dream of her in his dreams. She stood on the rocks, her wings spread wide, her eyes full of fire. Sometimes she whispered his name. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she turned and walked into the dark woods, leaving him alone. He always woke with his heart racing, his hand reaching for the feather he kept tucked safely in his pocket. One evening, Ethan walked to the same pool of silver water where he had first seen her. The water rippled under the moons, but she was not there. He waited for hours, but no figure appeared on the rocks, no song carried through the air. Only the sound of the forest's strange creatures calling, branches creaking in the wind. Finally, he sank to his knees, whispering into the night, "Where are you?" The locals of Vellora were not human, but sometimes their forms appeared at a distance. Tall, feathered figures with glowing eyes, carrying spears and torches. Ethan never let them see him. Hiding in shadows until they passed, he heard their voices. Sometimes, deep and sharp, carrying across the woods like echoes of thunder. From what he understood, they were searching. Whispers reached even him, stories of a forbidden union. A bond between human and feathered that could bring either blessing or curse. Ethan felt a chill each time he remembered Kalira's words. Her fear, her plea for secrecy, it all began to make sense. One night, as he worked on the ship, the drumming returned. Boom, 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 slow and heavy, carrying through the forest. Like a heartbeat, Ethan froze, the sound dragging him back to the night he first saw her. The memory of her fear was sharp in his mind. He stepped outside, the feather clutched in his hand, in the distance. He saw the glow of torches moving through. The trees' voices rose, calling words he could not understand. And then, faintly, he thought he heard her voice, not singing, but crying out. His heart raced. But when he ran toward the sound, there was nothing, only shadows and silence. The days stretched into weeks. Ethan's repairs made progress, his ship slowly coming back to life. Yet the emptiness inside him grew heavier. Each night he returned to the forest. Each night he searched, but she never came. It was as if she had been a dream born from the storm. And yet, the golden feather in his hand told him it had been real. On the 30th night, as the moons rose high, Ethan stood outside his half-repaired ship. The forest was still, the air heavy. He looked at the feather in his hand and whispered, "Kalira, if you're out there, come back." The silence answered him, deep and endless. He felt the weight of her absence crush against his chest, and then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the trees, came a soft glow. Not moonlight, not torchlight, but something warm, alive. He narrowed his eyes, holding his breath. The glow pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. Ethan's heart raced as he took a step forward. For the first time in 30 days, he felt she might not be gone after all. The night was quiet again, 30 days since the storm and since Kalira vanished. Ethan stood outside his ship, half repaired, staring into the dark forest. His hands were rough from work, his body tired. But his mind was restless every night. For a month he had waited, hoping, searching, listening. But she never came. Only silence, only memories, only the golden feather he kept close to his heart. That night, the air felt different. The wind carried a strange warmth, and the forest seemed to breathe slower. The insects were silent, and even the trees did not creak. Ethan felt the hair on his neck rise. Something was coming. Something unseen but powerful. Then he heard it. Not the drums, not the cries of the forest beasts, but a soft call. It was her voice, faint, trembling, but real. Ethan's chest tightened as he turned toward the sound. His feet moved on their own, carrying him into the trees, deeper and deeper, until the moonlight broke across a clearing. She was there. Kalira stood at the edge of the clearing, feathers glowing brighter than he had ever seen. Her eyes found his instantly. Filled with both joy and fear, she looked thinner, weaker, as if the month had stolen her strength, but she was alive. And in her arms she carried something wrapped in silken threads that shimmered under the moons. Ethan stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. "Kalira," he whispered. She trembled, her wings rustling softly, and she lowered the bundle to the ground. The threads shifted, and something inside pulsed with light. Ethan's eyes widened, his heart racing. It was not just a bundle, it was an egg. Massive, larger than anything he had ever seen. Its surface glowed with shifting patterns of blue and gold, like it was alive. Each pulse seemed to echo with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Kalira knelt beside it, her hands trembling as she touched the shell. Her voice was soft, broken, as she spoke in her language. Then she looked up at him and forced words in his tongue. "It is ours," she whispered, her voice shaking with fear and hope. Ethan staggered back, the weight of her words crashing into him. "Ours," he repeated, his voice faint. She nodded, tears shining in her glowing eyes. Her feathers shifted nervously, her body trembling like she expected him to reject her. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, his hands brushing the egg. The surface was warm, smooth, alive beneath his touch. He could feel the pulse of life inside. His chest ached, his mind spinning with questions. What is inside? What does this mean? He whispered. Kalira struggled to answer, her words breaking apart. Child. New. Danger, she said, each word heavy and fearful. Her eyes begged him to understand what she could not fully explain. Ethan stared at the egg, his thoughts racing, part human, part alien, something born from them both. The forest felt darker now, as if watching them. The distant drums began again, slow and heavy. Kalira flinched, clutching the egg tighter. Her eyes burned with urgency as she spoke. They must not find. Must not know. Her voice broke, and Ethan saw true fear there, not just fear for herself, but for the life inside the egg. He placed his hand firmly over hers. Meeting her eyes, they won't, he said. His voice steady, we'll protect. She stared at him, searching his face, and then slowly nodded. Her body relaxed slightly, though the fear never left her eyes. Together, they lifted the egg and carried it back toward the cave where they had once sheltered. Every step was heavy with danger. The drums grew louder, echoing through the forest. Ethan's heart pounded. Every shadow looked like a hunter waiting. But Kalira's determination burned stronger. Her feathers glowed like fire. Lighting the path ahead, inside the cave, they placed the egg gently on a bed of leaves and cloth. Kalira knelt beside it, her hands never leaving its surface. She whispered words in her language, prayers maybe, or promises. Ethan sat close, watching the egg pulse with life. For the first time in weeks, he felt something more than fear. He felt hope, but the hope was sharp with danger. If her people discovered this, they would never allow it. The egg was a secret too large, too powerful, too forbidden. Ethan knew then that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a lost human on an alien world. He was now protector of something new, something that could unite or destroy. The night grew colder, but the egg glowed with warmth. Kalira leaned against him, exhaustion pulling at her body. Her feathers brushed his arm as she whispered one last word before sleep took her. Protect. Ethan stared at the glowing shell, his hand resting on its surface. I will, he promised. Softly, but even as he spoke, the drums echoed again, closer this time. The hunters were coming, and time was running out. The cave was silent, except for the soft hum of the egg. It pulsed with light every few seconds, casting blue and gold shadows across the stone walls. Ethan sat close, his hand resting gently. On its warm surface, each pulse felt like a heartbeat, steady, alive, real. Kalira watched too. Her feathers dull with exhaustion, but her eyes burning with fear and love. The egg was more than just a secret, it was destiny. And both of them knew it. Outside, the drums echoed faintly. Distant but steady. Boom, boom, boom. Slow as the turning of the moons. Kalira flinched at every sound, her wings folding tighter around her body. They search, she whispered in her broken human tongue. They always search. Ethan nodded, his jaw set. They won't find it, not while I'm here, he said, though inside he wondered how long they could keep hiding. Days passed, and the egg grew brighter. Its shell shimmered like living crystal, and strange marks appeared across its surface lines and symbols glowing faintly. Ethan touched them one evening, and the lines moved under his fingers like liquid. Light, Kalira gasped, pulling him back, her voice sharp, careful. Her eyes were wide with warning, but also wonder. The egg. It knows you, she said slowly, struggling for words. Ethan stared, his chest heavy. It was impossible. Yet he could feel it too. The egg responded to him, as if it recognized him one night. When the moons were high, the hunters came close. Their torches flickered outside the cave, shadows moving across the stone walls. Ethan and Kalira held their breath. Pressing against the rocks, the egg's glow was too strong. Threatening to give them away, Kalira spread her wings around it, covering the light. Her feathers shook as she whispered soft songs. The hunters passed, their voices low and sharp. Ethan could not understand the words, but the tone was a Nuffinger command, warning when the sounds faded. Kalira slumped, her body trembling. Soon, she whispered, "They will know, they will find." Ethan placed his hand over hers, steady and firm. "Then we'll protect it," he said, his voice certain. Kalira searched his eyes, fear and hope warring inside her. At last. She nodded, but her feathers still trembled. The next day, the egg grew restless. The glow was constant now, brighter than fire. Strange sounds came from inside, soft thumps, faint cries, like a heartbeat mixed with a voice. Ethan sat stunned. His chest tight. "It's alive. It's speaking," he whispered. Kalira's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she breathed. "Child comes very soon." But the forest grew darker. The hunters' drums pounded closer every night. Their torches burned deeper into the woods, searching. Once Ethan saw them from a distant stall, figures with spears tipped in glowing stone. Their eyes sharp and merciless. Kalira whispered the truth in her broken words. "If they find egg, they kill. Me you, child." Her voice cracked, and she lowered her head. Ethan clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. "Then they won't find it," he said again. But this time it felt less like hope and more like a promise made in fire. That night, as Kalira slept lightly against the wall, Ethan sat awake, staring at the egg. It pulsed brighter under his hand, almost like it spoke only to him. A vision passed through his mind, shapes, colors, memories that were not his. He saw wings spread under twin moons. He saw fire and shadow. He saw a child standing between two worlds. When he pulled his hand away, his body shook. His breath heavy, he whispered, "What are you?" But the egg only pulsed an answer, steady and alive by dawn. The sound of drums shook the forest again. Closer than ever, Kalira woke in fear. Pulling Ethan close. "They know," she whispered, her eyes wild. "They come for us," Ethan looked at the glowing egg, then at her, his jaw tight. "Then we don't run," he said firmly. "We fight for it." Kalira's feathers bristled, her body tense. But after a moment, she nodded. She placed her hand on the egg, whispering soft words like a prayer. Then she looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with both sorrow and fire. "You protect her," she said, her voice strong despite the fear. Ethan placed his hand beside hers on the egg. "No," he said, "we both are." The egg pulsed between them, glowing brighter, as if it understood. The cave walls shone with light. The forest outside fell into silence. For a moment, all fear vanished, replaced by something stronger, destiny. But in the distance, the drums roared louder, the hunters drawing near. The child inside the egg was ready to be born, and the world outside was ready to destroy it. The cave was alive with light. The egg pulsed brighter than ever before, glowing with waves of blue and gold that painted the stone walls like fire. Ethan and Kalira sat close, their hands pressed against its surface, feeling the life moving. Inside, every pulse was stronger now, every sound clearer. A faint crack echoed through the cave, sharp and real. Ethan's breath caught, his eyes wide. "It's happening," he whispered. Kalira's feathers trembled, her eyes glistening with both fear and hope. Her lips moved in prayer. Soft words in her own language that Ethan could not understand, but he understood her heart. She was asking for strength, for safety, for the child about to come into a dangerous world. Outside, the drums thundered louder, closer than ever. Boom, boom, boom. Shaking the ground like footsteps of giants, the hunters were near, their torches glowing through the trees. Shadows dancing on the cave walls, Ethan clenched his fists, torn between running and staying, but one look at Kalira, one look at the egg. And his choice was clear. They would not leave, they would stand. Another crack split the shell, a glowing line spreading across its surface. The egg shook gently. Small sounds coming from within, soft cries, almost like a heartbeat mixed with a voice. Ethan leaned closer, his hand trembling. Kalira pressed her forehead against the egg, whispering, "Child, come." The shell broke again, light pouring through. Then, with a final shudder, the egg split open. A wave of glowing mist spilled into the cave, soft and warm, and from within, the child emerged, small, fragile, yet radiant with life. Its skin was pale, but shimmered faintly with blue. Tiny feathers covered its arms, soft and golden. Its eyes opened slowly, large and glowing, a perfect mix of Kalira's fire and Ethan's humanity. The child let out a soft cry, the sound echoing like a song across the cave. Kalira gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks as she lifted the child gently into her arms. "Mine," she whispered, then looked at Ethan, her voice breaking. "Ours." Ethan's chest tightened, his throat thick with emotion. He reached out, touching the tiny hand that grasped his finger. Warmth spread through him, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. This is real," he whispered, his eyes burning. The child cooed softly, its glow spreading brighter, as if answering him. But the moment of peace broke when voices roared outside. The hunters had arrived, their shadows stretching across the cave entrance, their drums shaking the earth. Kalira clutched the child to her chest, her feathers flaring wide in fear and defiance. Ethan rose to his feet, standing before her, his body blocking the entrance. Torches lit the cave, and tall figures appeared, their eyes glowing with rage. Their leader stepped forward. Raising his spear tipped with burning crystal, he spoke. In a tongue Ethan did not know, but the meaning was clear: Ongor, judgment, death. Kalira cried out in her language, her voice sharp, pleading, defiant. She spread her wings around the child, refusing to give it up. The hunters shouted back, their voices full of fury. Ethan felt his heart pound, fear twisting inside him. But when he looked at Kalira, at the child glowing in her arms, his fear turned into fire. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "You will not take them." The hunters snarled, their weapons rising, but just as the leader took a step, the child cried out. The sound was not like any human baby, nor like Kalira's people. It was something new, soft, pure, powerful. The glow around the child spread in waves, filling the cave with light. The hunters froze, their weapons shaking in their hands. The drums outside fell silent. Even the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The child's glow wrapped around Ethan and Kalira, weaving them in light. The hunters lowered their spears slowly, confusion in their glowing eyes. Kalira's voice rose, strong and clear now, speaking in her tongue with authority. Her words echoed against the cave walls, sharp and commanding. Ethan did not know what she said, but he saw the hunters hesitate, saw the anger fade into fear. The leader lowered his spear, his eyes locked on the glowing child. He spoke a single word, then turned, one by one. The hunters stepped back, disappearing into the forest, their torches fading. The drums did not return. Silence filled the cave once more. Kalira held the child close, her body trembling, her eyes wet with tears. Ethan sank to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. He looked at the child again, small but shining with impossible power. What will happen now?" he whispered. Kalira met his eyes, her face torn between fear and wonder. Her feathers glowed faintly as she spoke, her voice soft but firm. This child. Change everything. She looked down at the baby, who blinked up at them with glowing eyes, not human, not feathered. Both. Ethan touched the child's hand again, his chest heavy but full of hope. He whispered, "Then maybe, both our worlds can change too." The child cooed again, its glow filling the cave like dawn. And in that moment, Ethan knew nothing would ever be the same again.